Welcome. You are listening to the Louis Minor Show. I'm your host, Louis Minor. Today is December 31st, 2022. Happy New Year. And let's get started. I want to apologize to everyone. In my haste to get my message out last episode, I didn't give proper introductions about who I am, why I'm hosting the show, why I'm doing a show, and just so you could get to know me a little bit better. My name is Louis Minor, if you don't know that already, and I am the Bell County Commissioner-elect for Precinct 4. I will be getting sworn in January 3rd, 2023. But to a little bit more about my background and where I come from, a little bit about my family, my education, and places that I've worked. Back about why I wanted to start this podcast to begin with. I think this is going to be the best way for me to communicate with a broad audience, to get my message out, to let people know what's going on in the county and things that are just important for us. I am a Democrat, a progressive Democrat. I want to see progress in our county, in our state. And some of that takes getting out there, pressing the flesh, talking to citizens, dealing with local officials, state officials, county officials, and really pushing for us to continue to grow and to make progress. So, a little bit about me. I was born Belton, Texas. I am a Belton Tiger. I lived in Belton most of my life. I have, both my parents, they recently moved to Rogers, which is surprising. But both my parents, they're, for the most part, born and raised in Belton. And I have one older sister who lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then I have two younger sisters, both live in the Austin area. And I am the only boy, mama's boy. And a lot of, growing up with the family, going to family events in and around Belton, a lot of cousins in the Belton area, in this area. Hispanic families are very large. There was always a joke that, before you go and date someone in town, you better make sure you're not related to them. So, I have fond memories of growing up in Belton. And I don't remember being too political growing up. Never heard it spoke of very often about politics. Most of my family, at least the men, did some form of construction, either working for someone that owned a business that was in the construction field or having their own business. Like my father still has a construction company. He does residential construction, dirt work, site work. And that's what I remember everyone talking about whenever I was growing up, mainly work related issues, not really who's the president, who's in office, especially what's going on locally. I never heard anything like that growing up. I don't recall. So if you look out into the bigger picture of things, that the Hispanics are now the majority in the state of Texas. And in politics, you always hear, well, why are they not voting? And I think it's a generational thing. It's going to take time to get the Hispanic voters used to exercising that muscle. A lot of families are first generation, second generation. So you just don't have that family muscle of going out, voting, talking politics. I could tell you that has changed for my family, at least, obviously, because now I'm elected. But, ever since I have a daughter and a grandson, and ever since my daughter was 16, she's been involved in politics, obviously, because I was. So she would come out and do stuff. But definitely since she was the age to vote, she's voted every election. I have to remind her uh, to vote, but I think she would vote anyway if I reminded her or not. I'm just the type of person that I vote on the very first day of early voting, at the very first hour or two that the polls are open. So, to me, if you're not voting uh, during that time, you're already late. So I'm always pushing people to go out and vote. But yeah, so my family now votes. I don't know. I'm trying to get all my cousins and other relatives, extended family, to make it a habit of voting. But like I said, definitely it's going to be a generational thing for Hispanics to get out and vote, where you see that it's making significant changes to our elected officials, our electorate. It's starting to happen. You're starting to see it. But anyways, back to me and my family. So yeah, born and raised in Belton, fond memories in Belton. I graduated from Belton High School in 1997. Yes, 1997. And I was the first male in my family to graduate high school. I don't know, to be honest with you, how I graduated high school. I think it had maybe something to do because I was on the football team. I don't remember being very exceptionally into school or anything like that. I went because I had to go and I wanted to get out of the house. There were some things that I was interested in, but for the most part, I was not an exceptional student. I was just ready to get that pass, graduate, and get to work. And once I graduated from high school, I started looking for work. And the first place that I landed a job was Wilson Art International. Um, Wilson Art is a laminate company, a local laminate company in Temple, but they provide laminate for all over the world, industries for all over the world. And my mom worked there for many years, got me the job, and I was happy with working there. At least at the beginning, for a young 18-year-old, I believe I was making $9 an hour when I first started, maybe 8.75, but that was good money to me. I was happy with that job. At the time, Wilson Art, there were people that would work at Wilson Art, retire from Wilson Art, and they had a great retirement. I mean, it was, far above anything in the Bell County area that I can recall. So, yeah, I was happy. I thought I was going to do my entire time there. But after about 3 years of working there, rotating, I I felt a calling, and it's something that was probably building ever since I was in high school. That I remember taking a job placement test, like, hey, what would you do? What kind of job would you be good at as an adult? And I remember taking that test, and one of the first things was police officer. So ever since then, growing up, I remember watching Cops, and that really, you know, ignited a little slow burning fire. But after working at Wilson Art for 3 years, I I was ready to move on. I realized that I had more to offer and I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more for myself. And so I was looking around how to become a cop, and I was like, well, let me go to college. And Temple College had a program to allow you to do everything you needed, get all the required training, peace officer. But I guess let me back it up just a little bit. Whenever I decided to go to college, the whole thing that I wanted to do was become a state trooper. That was like the, golden standard for me in my head. I want to be a state trooper. I want to wear the cowboy hat, drive around in the black and white. Those guys look very professional. They look like the top of the top for law enforcement. So when I went to the DPS website, I want to say at the time it said that you needed a minimum of 12 to 15 credit hours of college to apply. Obviously, I didn't have that, so that's why I was like, okay, let me see where I could get this at Temple College, and then I could go and apply with DPS. So they had a certificate program there at Temple College. I enrolled into the Peace Officer Certificate Program. I believe it was maybe 20 to 30 hours, somewhere in there. But that was going to be my plan. Get my certificate, apply for DPS, and go be a state trooper. But DPS did something sneaky while I was in college. And during that time period, they moved up their educational requirements 2 times. So the first time they moved it up, it was to, I think, 40 or 50 credit hours to apply for a job with DPS. So when they did that, it made an associate's degree within reach for me. I never, like I told you, I was a bad student at high school. I never imagined I would be in college. But here I was in college trying to obtain a goal and to become a state trooper. And because they bumped up their requirements to 50 credit hours or whatever it was, I went ahead and made the decision that I'll go ahead and get my associate's degree, because associate's degree was 60 hours. And that's what I did. I got my associate's degree. I got my peace officer certificate from Temple College, and I applied. And that was not the only place I applied. I applied at a couple of places, but DPS never called me back. But one organization did. I filled out the application. I did everything I was supposed to do. And that was with the city of Killeen. And I remember going all the way to the final, I think it was like a 3-panel interview with 3 officers. And I was nervous. I believe 23, somewhere in there. Now, keep in mind, I've only worked one job for 3 years. And then I went to college and got my associate's degree. Went all the way to the end of the hiring process, and I did not get in. And I remember asking them, why did they not hire me? I thought I met every goal. I thought I was a shoo-in. And one of the comments was, we did not think you were dependable enough. And that really, I didn't understand that, how could you get me not being dependable from my resume, but okay. I had a friend at the time, he was working, he recently had got hired with Waco PD. And he told me, he said, Louis, join the Army, join the National Guard. And that way, no one will ever be able to tell you that you are not dependable because you have that military on your resume. And it made sense to me. I was like, you know what? I could do that. I still could be a police officer somewhere, anywhere, whoever hires me. And I could be in the Army at the same time. And since I had a college degree, he told me, he recommended that I go in as an officer. So I was like, okay, let's do that. So I signed up with the Texas Army National Guard in Temple. And I had to go to basic training like everyone else. I enlisted under the officer option. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri as a PFC and graduated basic training and came back to start officer candidate school in the Army National Guard. But I went to the selection board for the Texas Army National Guard to start the OCS program, and they denied me. And they recommended, they said, Louis, I think I was PFC at the time, PFC minor, why don't you go to college, join ROTC, and get your bachelor's degree? It was only another 60 hours of college that I would need to get ROTC and to get commissioned as a, second lieutenant in the United States Army. So it made sense to me. I did that. And, keep in mind, I was still eyeing DPS, being a state trooper. And the state troopers had raised their entry educational requirements to 120 hours or 110 hours, pretty much a bachelor's degree. So with all those things in mind, I said, okay, I'll do that. So I enrolled with Tarleton State University, Central Texas, graduated from there, and commissioned as a new lieutenant, second lieutenant, United States Army, Texas Army National Guard. Keep in mind, we had two wars going on at the time. We had the Afghanistan War and we had the Iraq War. So they needed bodies to serve. After I graduated, I got in commission. I got orders to infantry school. I got selected as an infantry officer. And I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. In Fort Benning, I trained. They had, at the time, it was called Bullock 1 and Bullock 2. So I trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. Graduated from there. I think it took almost a year, not quite, but almost a year of training. Came back to Texas and got picked up to work full-time in the state G3 office, where we were in charge of training, making sure that soldiers were going to training, so those positions were being filled that were the state was getting allocated. And while I was there, I asked my commander, I was like, hey, can I go to airborne school? They had all these airborne slots. And he said, sure, go ahead. So I went to airborne school back at Fort Benning, Georgia. and got my jump wings. And when I came back from airborne school, my unit, what was the 124 Cav at Waco, was getting mobilized to deploy to Iraq. So the National Guard is a little bit more different. Well, it is different than active duty. Obviously, you're not working full time in the military, and so we have to mobilize. We have to train for a couple of months before we would get sent to Iraq. But that's what we did. We trained at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and in the fall, I want to say November, December of 2008, we deployed. I deployed to Iraq, Baghdad. I was in VBC, Victory Base Complex, Camp Liberty, Camp Slayer, and I forgot the other one. But those were the two camps that I mainly stayed at. So I spent 14 months in Baghdad. I stayed there a little bit longer than my actual unit did. I volunteered and stayed just a couple more months in Baghdad. So I was there with the Texas Army National Guard, and then I stayed a little bit with a couple of months with the Oregon National Guard, and I enjoyed my time there. We served our country, fought for freedom, all that other good stuff. Lost, soldiers there, but we went over there. We accomplished our mission, got in, got out. The majority of our people got home, and then when I came back to Texas, I was looking for something to do. I had pretty much, now keep in mind all this time that I'm telling you about, these are years and years that I'm talking about. So whenever I commissioned in the Army, that was 2006. Whenever I got back from Iraq, it was the end of 2009. So I was looking, after 3 years of doing Army stuff, I was looking for more Army stuff to do. And the way the National Guard worked is they had a big old long list of positions they needed filled, by rank and officers and what they're looking for. And I have never been on the West Coast, and there were some positions that were up at Fort Lewis in Washington State. So I got assigned and served 2 years as the executive officer for the Warrior Transition Battalion, Bravo Company, at Fort Lewis. And I was first lieutenant up there. I had time and grade to commission, and I remember sending an email to my home unit, because that's the way the Guard works. You had to go through your home unit. And I was like, hey, it's time for me to promote. I have enough time and grade. And they replied back to me, we don't promote people while they're on orders like that. So, and this is kind of where I'm going with this story real quick, of squeaky wheel gets the oil. It just so happened that while I was up there, we called this individual the TAG, the Texas Adjutant General, the general for the entire state of Texas, and the Texas National Guard. He came up there to see wounded soldiers, Texas National Guard soldiers that were in our unit, the Warrior Transition Battalion. He talked with them, interviewed them, and we brought them over there to him. And there's this mindset as an officer that, officers don't complain, officers get things done, we plan, we prepare, officers don't complain. That was always drilled in our head. But this was my one opportunity to bring up a personnel issue with the tag. And he looked at me, and I didn't even know if I was going to bring it up or anything, but he looked at me, and it was me and one other guy that was there as, we called him cadre. We were assigned there as cadre. And he said, "How are things with y'all?" And I let the enlisted talk first. And, he said everything was great. And then he looked at me and he said, "Well, what about you, Lieutenant?" And I said, "Well, sir, to be honest with you, I'm having issues promoting. I have time and grade. My unit back home told me that I can't get promoted while I'm up here on orders." And he had a warrant officer with him as his aide. And he looked at the warrant officer and said, "Get his information." And he said, "Lieutenant, if you're not promoted in 3 months, let me know. Here's my card." And within 4 months, I was promoted to captain. So that's where my squeaky wheel gets the oil. You got to be an advocate for yourself. If you're not an advocate for yourself, then how do you expect to get ahead? Someone else is not going to be an advocate for you. So you have to fight for yourself. I guess that's a little bit more of the bigger story. Believe in yourself, fight for yourself. You earned what you're trying to get. So that's kind of life lesson that I learned. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. The worst thing they could do is tell you no. So ask. And then you go from there. You plan accordingly. So I did 2 years up at Fort Lewis, Washington. And I was coming off orders. I was ready to move past the military. And I got a job with the Department of Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. as a incident management officer in the National Operations Center, commonly known as the NOC, National Operations Center, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. They were the operations center for the Secretary of Homeland Security. At the time, it was Janet Napolitano. So we were responsible for her getting information to the secretary. Anytime there was any cabinet level meetings, we would organize them, and all the 7 major subcomponents would answer to us, report to us, and then we would send those to the secretary. And that was really when I saw big government work, big government function. You've always, even today, people complain, government is too big. They don't get anything accomplished. It takes forever. But the one moment that I'm referencing is Hurricane Sandy. When Hurricane Sandy hit the New York area, I was in Homeland Security, and I saw the snowball effect of clearing the red tape, big government making stuff happen to help the people that needed the help. And that was done in wildfires, that was done in hurricanes and in floods. But seeing it all come together all at once in a major event like that, it really, really brought home to me the importance of government and why we have a government. And we need government there for the floods, the hurricanes, the natural disasters, even financial disasters, recessions, depressions. We need government there to support the people, to make sure that when all else fails, that there's something out there that we could depend on. Someone that's going to come and rescue us, someone that's going to help us. And the government is us. The government is us, funded by us. Remember that. So while I was up there in the operations center, I went ahead, and this was like 2013. I got my master's degree in public administration. And since that's where I worked, that type of work, my concentration was in continuity of government. So got my master's from Norwich University, a military college, well-known military college. And after about 2 years of working at Homeland Security, staring at TVs all day, all night, I rotated, and I was like, this wasn't for me. I wasn't pushed. I like to be challenged. I like to be pushed. And Homeland Security wasn't doing it for me. And I felt home calling. So I said to myself, now is the time to come home, get into politics, and start my own business. Use my military veteran status and try and get into construction. I grew up around construction. My dad did construction, and see where I could go. And that's what I did. I came back. I got involved heavily into politics, and I got my business up and running. Now, my business was definitely more successful faster than my politics has been, but it's a long game with both your business and in politics. It's a long game. You have to stay engaged. You have to network, and both of those things are required to be successful in business and in politics. So we'll switch gears to politics. Like I said, I moved back, got involved in politics, the Democratic Party. I was a Republican back whenever I first started voting. I worked at the jail, the Bell County Jail, for a little bit. And, I supported my boss. My boss was a Republican. I wanted my job, so I voted for my job. I voted for my boss because he was the one that was there. But, the sheriff is not really a big political, controversial position. So it really never registered with me, the party, the Democratic or the Republican Party, and the views on both of those. And I think the Army helped me kind of realize a little bit more of all of the nuances and differences between the political parties. So I came back to Belton, to Bell County, and started getting involved in politics. Now, these are observations, but whenever I attended a Republican Party meeting, they tended to be older people, seniors, and tended to be white, at least going to the meetings. I really didn't see a lot of diversity there. But whenever I went to the Democratic Party meetings, and you saw young, and you saw old, and you saw black and white and Hispanic and LGBT and Asian, and just to me, that looked like the world that I've seen. And from the military, from the different communities that I've been all over, the country. that was what was familiar with me. That registered with me. So that's where I went. I looked at the Democratic Party, and that called to me. Now I am gay, and serving in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where I had to hide who I was, could have been fired at any time, kicked out of the military that I loved and served at any time. Seeing President Obama repeal, getting it repealed, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to now where you can serve openly without the fear of being fired or terminated or any type of retribution. That's what really started leaning me towards the Democratic Party, is the LGBT rights and how those rights are civil rights, and civil rights are still being fought for our Black brothers and sisters, our Hispanic brothers and sisters, and all of the minorities are fighting for a seat at the table, expanded rights. And that's what the Democratic Party stands for, is equality among everyone. And even in business. And that's what I support. So coming back to Bell County, we had no Democratic elected officials at the county level. No Democrats at any level that were openly Democratic that I was aware of. At the time, I ran for Congress, trying to bite off more than I could chew, but I made a lot of good connections. And remember where I told you got to be successful. To be successful in business or in politics, you have to network. I met a lot of great people down in Williamson County, because it was Williamson County and Bell County were a part of Congressional District 31 that I ran in. A lot of those connections, a lot of friends that I made in Williamson County are now elected officials. We've stayed in it. We have, kept on fighting this good fight, fighting for what is right, and running for office. And now we're in office. Terry Cook, very good friend of mine. I remember going to parades with her. She is now County Commissioner, Williamson County Precinct 1. Another good friend of mine, he will be swearing me in on January 3rd, is John Busey. He is state rep for Williamson County, I believe 136 district, House District. And he's been there for a while. And many people now on city council in Williamson County that are Democratic, openly Democratic, and here in Bell County as well. And so we're starting to see that change. And at least on the county level, it started with Dr. Brown, Claudia Brown. She was the first Democrat elected in probably 20 years, 2 decades or more in Bell County. And that was in 2016. And since then, you've seen that grow. The commissioner seat in that I'm in now switched over to a Democrat. The outgoing person that I'm replacing is Democratic. He decided not to run for re-election. John Driver, the first African American on the commissioner's court, which is a testament to him on that. But we also have now two justices of the peace here in Precinct 4 that are Democratic, and we have our constable here in Precinct 4 that is Democrat, and the county commissioner is a Democrat. So we're changing. Bell County is changing. I'm glad to be a part of this change. I'm glad to be involved with making change happen, finding candidates to run for office, and just learning from this experience with other people that really want to get involved in our community and change it for the better. One of those, she just ran, Stacy Wilson, great person, has a great heart, and she will be involved. And I can see her going places. So, that's where we are right now. January 3rd, new county commissioner for Precinct 4. I will get sworn in by State Representative John Busey. I will be the first Latino, first Hispanic on the Commissioner's Court, and I'll be the first openly gay elected official in Bell County. Representation matters in government. Diversity matters in government. Having people with different experiences, family experiences, work experiences, educational experience, all that matters in government. So what we have to do now is govern. Switching gears to my priorities once I get sworn into office. So I have short-term and long-term goals for my first term, and I think they're all attainable, but it's going to take some work. So the first goal, since I got elected into office, the first thing that I started to do is go around and meet all of the department heads that pretty much answer to the Commissioner's Court. Wanted to see how they function. Wanted to see, because to me, as of now, they were just a line item, a budget line item with duties and responsibilities. So what I wanted to do is see how they work, how they interact with other elected officials, other departments. And I would tell them, I don't know what I don't know. So everyone, it was a learning experience. I still have to meet a lot of the elected officials, but that's on my to-do list. And I saw room for improvements here and there, and that go in line with, some of my priorities. The first thing I want to do is I really want to have a small business initiative. And what does that mean? So what I want to do is anytime the county is spending money on goods and services, I want to make a good faith effort to spend those dollars locally, have local businesses provide those goods and services. And on large contracts, large projects, such as the jail and the upcoming Killeen Annex, I want those contracts to have subcontracting goals where they have to have a certain percentage of minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, hub businesses. And that's common practice in the contracting world, both in federal and in state. And a lot of counties and cities do this as well. So I want to make sure that we're doing that. Now, some of those things is going to require a vote, but some of the things that do not require a vote is to host small business registrations where we encourage small businesses to come and register to do business with the county. I don't know how many vendors we have now in the county, but I'm pretty sure there's room for improvement on that. And I really want to focus on doing that. Another short-term goal is going to be, obviously, I mentioned it just a while ago, is the Killeen Annex. Being intimately involved with the design and the building of the Killeen Annex, making sure that our JPs, our constable, the tax assessor collector, adult probation, and indigent services, Central Appraisal District have a safe working place that they could be proud of, that the county residents can be proud of, the citizens of Killeen can be proud of. So yeah, I'm ready to roll up my sleeve and get to work on those two immediate needs that I'm going to face on day one. Something that's been out there for several years now, and I'm walking into it, but I'm prepared to address it head on, is the Confederate statue. I would like it demolished, but for whatever reason, some people hold it dear and in reverence to it, and if they want to move it somewhere, I'm okay with that too. But the appropriate place for a Confederate monument is not on the county's grounds, county courthouse. Fort Hood is changing their name to Fort Cavazos at the beginning of the year, renaming a lot of their buildings on the base that are named after Confederate generals, Confederacy, anything. I read in the paper today, the city of Killeen is going to bring up discussion renaming Fort Hood Street to Fort Cavazos Street. I can support that 110%. I will support that. I'll be out publicly supporting that. So it's time for the county to move on from the past and be proud of our future, to be proud of what we're doing. And then I guess one of the longest term goals, but it's definitely within reach, is improving our public transportation. So right now we have here in Bell County a public transportation system that is failing us, but it's not because of them. It's not their fault. It's called the HOP. And the HOP is a nonprofit funded by cities and the counties and the federal government. So they buy into the HOP for services. And if money is tight, what is the first thing that's going to be cut? Public transportation. So speaking with business owners, the EDCs, this is something that we need to have a good, reliable, robust public transportation system. That is something that will improve the quality of life. It'll add to the economic development of our county. It's a win-win. We need good, reliable public transportation, and we need it now. We don't need to wait until we are as big as Williamson County, Travis County, before we realize the error of what we're doing now. So that's going to be a job of mine. Getting support, improve public transportation system. And it's not the HOP's fault. They're constrained by all the cities separately voting on how much to fund them. You know, they're doing their best with what they have. But now it's time for the county to step in and really progress us into the future. So, this is my second show. I really haven't shared the first show too much. I sent it to a couple of friends and they gave me some feedback. But now I'm going to put it out there. So, message me, comment, send me a message on Facebook, Twitter, and let's do this. Have a happy and prosperous new year. We got a lot of work to do, and I'm glad you are coming along for the ride. We will talk to you later.